So fun fact about today's video, I'm recording this on October 28th, and as I'm doing that, there is an enormous protest going on in the Republic of Korea by teachers. And it's mainly concerning this law, I think it was from 2014, that outlaws what they call emotional abuse in schools, but they never define it. And as a result of that, and parental pressures being what they are, it has effectively become impossible to discipline kids in Korean schools at all. And there's been a big controversy over this. There have been several high-profile suicides of young teachers. And as that's going on, and I think this is a coincidence, but it could be that that this Asian boss, because I'm using them again, it could be that they've been holding this back and they dropped it today because of the protests, but they have one about English teachers in Korea. What really caught my eye about this when it came out was the thumbnail. It's always got the little piece of text on it, and on this one, the thumbnail text is "Dream Job Abroad" and a question mark. Now, you know the old rule that when a newspaper headline is phrased as a question, the answer to that question is always no. And obviously I've done 60 videos on this point, but in light of what's happening, I want to go back over this just to see if their response is at all similar to my own, or if these people are going to try to put more of a positive spin on it, which very hard to put a positive spin on working in Korea, which I really, really, really do not recommend. So let's begin now.
Some of the biggest struggles that I have faced in Korea specifically is not being taken seriously as a teacher.
They think we're all like losers back home that come here because we have no other options in like America or wherever you're from.
I don't want to sound weird in saying so, but I feel special here. I feel like I'm really required to be here. The supply of English teachers is low, and the demand is always high compared to the supply.
Hey bosses, it's Steven from Asian Boss. Teaching English has always been one of the most popular jobs for English-speaking foreigners and expats in Asia. And South Korea is no exception. But have you ever wondered what it's really like to be an English teacher in South Korea? We were able to invite a group of English teachers to share their honest thoughts. Let's see what they have to say. Where are you from and how long have you been an English teacher here in Korea?
Hello, my name is Ren, and I have been an English teacher here, almost 10 years now.
10 years, okay. She seems to be American. I'm just going to say upright, most of the teachers I worked with were short-timers. They'd only been there a year or two. The only person I knew who'd been there over 5 years was South African. And the situation in South Africa is that you meet South Africans everywhere. It's a big diaspora, and you kind of see the political situation and the economic situation in that country, and it's easy to understand why. Continuing.
And I'm from Texas.
So I'm from Australia, and I think all up it's been about 5.5 years.
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri in the U.S. I've been teaching English for over 4 years.
Well, I'm originally from Lincoln, Nebraska, but grew up in Kansas City, Missouri in the United States. I came to Korea, I've been in Korea for over 25 years, I think, and I've taught just a little bit everybody.
So I'm from Dallas, Texas. I've been here for about 14 months, maybe 15.
That sounds good.
So I'm on my second year. I teach at a Hagwon in Songbuk, which is like northeast Seoul.
God, 2 years.
And what is a Hagwon?
It's like a after-school academy, so it's not public school and it's not a international school. It's private academy.
Why did you choose to become an English teacher in Korea as opposed to any other Asia countries?
I moved here for a boy, a Korean boy,
okay.
And I thought, why not Korea? It's become a popular place to go. The food's amazing. I'm not a K-pop stan or one of those foreigners who moves there for that.
That's kind of what I'm expecting to see more of. Moving overseas for romance, I've done that. Don't recommend it. Really, really don't recommend it. But, your life.
For that reason, but I really got into Korean cinema, like Parasite, and Squid Game, obviously. So I wanted to see what all the fuss was about as well.
I found out about this job in the days when there were placement agencies, and they would advertise in the newspaper, and it'd say teach in Korea. And it was the only interesting job I saw in the newspaper. All the other teaching jobs were, do I really want to go there? Do I really want to teach there? But this said teach in Korea. And I checked, is that North Korea or South Korea? Because I've never heard of the idea of amalgamating these together, culturally speaking. And so I said, okay, South Korea.
It appears that teaching.
So, that's kind of interesting. This was an older. He got this through a newspaper because he's been there for a long time. There are still a lot of placement agencies, but regarding Korea, these days it's considered a plum position because, again, everybody's obsessed with Korean popular culture right now. But it used to be Korea was kind of a starter country that you went to because you couldn't get into the country you actually wanted. You couldn't get the job you actually wanted. There's one gentleman I met who was actually a business owner. He'd recently sold the business, but he'd been over there, he said 15 years. And what he said is that when he came over, which would have been around the same time I started working overseas, people who were working in Korea were there because they couldn't get into Japan. And of course, there are still a lot of people, a lot of Japanophilia out there, a lot of otakus out there still really want to get into Japan. But I think these days Korea is considered kind of the plum assignment, which is wrong. But, you know, it's your life. I'm not your daddy.
English is one of the most common jobs for foreigners here in Korea. Why do you think so many foreigners want to become English teachers here in Korea?
That's a good question. I mean, in my experience, there's two types of people that come here to teach English. There's people like me who just kind of want to see the world a little bit more, experience a new culture, do something fun. And then you have these like socially awkward K-pop fans that come here and think Korea is like exactly like what they see on these K-dramas and watching BTS and stuff. And those people never have a good time.
Being an English teacher in Korea is not the most common job. It is the most common job for Westerners and white people in Korea. A lot of people these days are influenced by the Hallyu wave to come to Korea. And Korea's cultural export in the world is very, very strong.
Okay, so interesting point there is it's only most common if you're white. That's very true. Or Western, to be honest. There's actually quite a few black teachers over there, a lot more than I ever encountered in China. But actually, most foreigners, and I believe that the largest group of foreigners in Korea are actually Chinese, but they are Chinese of Korean descent. That's an important thing to remember about the foreign-born population in Korea. It's not that large in absolute terms. It's 2 to 4%, depending on whom you ask. But a lot of those people are ethnic Koreans, and so they blend in pretty well. And that's a big issue. Continuing.
I don't know if it's necessarily that they want to become English teachers. I think it's just the easiest thing to do when you first get here, especially if you have your bachelor's degree.
And so what are the main requirements and how strict are they to become an English teacher?
You need to pass drug tests, you need to have a clean criminal record, 4-year bachelor's degree, and basically that's the minimum. And then you can have TESOL certificates, TEFL certificates, master's degrees help, diplomas also help. The interview process, I got rejected by quite a few schools actually, because I think what they were looking for was more of a foreigner face. I'm ethnically Korean, and so I think that they wanted to have somebody not ethnically Korean teaching the children and expose them to that.
Oh yeah. So I did have coworkers who were ethnically Korean, but if you're Asian, but especially if you're Korean, you're going to have a hard time. That's a big deal in China too. Let's just lay it out. Chinese, the parents who bring their kids to these schools expect their kids to be taught by white people. Or at the very least, let me rephrase that. They don't want them to be taught by Asians. I've had Asians that I knew, or Asian Americans that I knew from college. This one kid I knew who was a serious overachiever was over there at the same time I was, and he was really struggling to find a job. I have other stories. The very first place I ever worked, all the way back in 2008, I had a coworker who was English, but was of probably Vietnamese descent. And she had so many troubles with the parents. The parents back then had way too much money. They'd bring in interpreters so they could complain to us. And yeah, apparently on a fairly regular basis, one of these parents would come in with an interpreter and scream at them for slipping in someone with an Asian accent. She had like a Mary Poppins accent. But yeah, it's very, very difficult I know it is in China, and evidently it is in Korea as well. I don't think it's as hard in Korea, but it's still an issue. They do want foreigners. That's just how it is. Continuing.
You need to be a passport holder from one of the 7 English-speaking countries, even though there's more than 7. I've had friends who are not from one of the 7 English-speaking countries, maybe from Poland, and they have gotten a job teaching English. And I've actually had some instances where we were both interviewing for the same position, but the white person got hired. And I've had hagwon owners say to me, "Oh, this job for whiteface." Just flat out say it to me, say it to my face. So, well, at least in that case, they were just honest about it. I've seen job postings, job announcements online, and they'll say this job is for female from the UK, or this job is not for male from South Africa. So sometimes it's very detailed.
Complete.
Okay, so a couple points there. One, the gender thing is also a deal in China. A lot of jobs, in particular for teaching, and especially for younger kids, they do prefer women. It used to be that women were pretty rare. Like when I first came over to China, there weren't a lot of women in that country. These days, I think it's about parity. And in Korea, there may be more women than men right now. I'm not entirely sure because the stats are really bad. But the stuff there about being that specific about what they want, I've seen that in China as well. Already starting to see a lot of similarities between the two, which is kind of what I expected. But honestly, there's a much larger foreign-born population in the ROK compared to the PRC, so I'm kind of surprised to see that it is as bad, but not that surprised. Not that surprised. It's the same dynamic, just in a slightly different culture. Continuing.
Really clean criminal record. Like, you can't have anything on your record. I had to have something removed from my record before I came here because I had a little too much fun in college once. So that cost me about $1,000 to have that removed before I came to Korea because they're so strict here. But other than that, it's really easy.
We'll cut that out so your employer doesn't see that.
Oh, they know.
Okay, all right, okay, all right. Do you need to speak?
Okay. I have, honestly, I think in both countries, had people offer to change things to make it easier for me to get in. These are countries where it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's what you can get away with. And like they have a lot of rules on China. Like one of the rules in China is that you can't be a teacher if you're over 60. Technically you can't be a foreign specialist, which is mostly English teachers. I had coworkers who were over 60. No one cared. There are ways around all these rules. Continuing.
Speak Korean to become an English teacher in Korea?
You don't need to speak it, but it seriously helps if you're teaching beginners, because when their level is like, "Oh, hi, my name is then you're kind of screwed.
My Korean is horrible. For as long as I've been here, I am probably the worst student of Korean ever in the history of language if you go by percentage of time stayed versus amount acquired. So they haven't kicked me out yet, and they probably won't kick you out either.
No, you don't need to speak Korean. In your kind of daily life outside of work, it helps, but actually inside of the classroom, it's preferable that you don't speak Korean. Because once you start speaking Korean, the kids will not speak English.
So,
point on that, the place where I work, which again was a hagwon, and I don't even know if I mentioned this in the vlogs, they had a strict rule that the kids were not allowed to speak Korean in the classrooms at all, and I kept getting lectured for not enforcing this enough. So it's kind of a big deal. They do this in China as well. I've been saying that a lot because there are a lot of similarities between the two, but yeah, they really, really do not want you to speak. You're only supposed to speak the target language. And that is actually part of the methodology at a lot of these places, is to only use the target language, even if you know the more common language in that country. Continuing.
If you don't mind us asking, how much does a typical English teacher make per month in Korea?
Maybe lowest I've seen something like 2.2 or something, which feels really low to me. Maybe average around 3 million won, and then maybe, I mean, I think some places you could push for, but you'd probably have to work like really big hours. Like,
so obviously he's talking about won. The fun part about Korea is it is one of those countries where the currency is really low valued, so you get these gigantic numbers. 2.2 is not a lot. 2.2 is about probably $1,700 or $1,800, which I think typical where I was working was coming in between 2.5 and 3 million. The place I worked, the baseline pay was 2.5. I got paid a little bit more because I had experience. Not enough more. And honestly, given the cost of living, which I'm guessing is where they're going to go next, it doesn't go as far as you'd think. Like, the thing is, in China, I made the same amount, but because it's a much lower cost of living, I was able to save anywhere from 60 to 90% of that. So I actually have a lot of money built up overseas, whereas in Korea, I have very little, even if I would have stayed there longer, because the money just does not go as far. It's just a much, much more expensive country. Continuing.
I think the most experienced teachers, maybe, they would work 35 hours a week. That's like teaching hours, and maybe they would push 4 or just go over 4.
For me personally, I make, before taxes, insurance, and everything like that, I make about 3.2 million won a month. And then after all the stuff is deducted, I believe it's about 2.9 million a month, which with the roughly 1,300 something won to US dollar exchange is about 2K a month, 2,000 US dollars a month.
The introductory wage for a first-time English teacher in Korea has not risen since 2002. For 21 years, the basic wage of an average English teacher has not increased. It is now 2.1 million won, 2,100,000 won a month. Now, that is minimum wage. Most schools offer housing for their English teachers, which is great. However, the quality of housing really, really depends on the school. Most English teachers in Korea come to houses where the apartments are filled with black mold, and they get lung diseases from these houses where Koreans themselves won't even rent.
So I didn't have that problem. I don't think I ever showed off my apartment, except for the little piece behind me when I was recording. But again, let's extend this to China. My housing situation varied dramatically. I was occasionally put up in really nice, like really big apartments that were probably pretty expensive, but it was a low-cost area. I was put up in places that were just these little closets where I didn't have that much room to myself. And, some places, the quality of just the apartments, of the housing in this part of the world just varies so much. And this is one of the biggest risks. I would suggest, if you are considering working overseas in any country and your employer is going to be providing you with housing, insist on seeing what the housing looks like first. And getting some kind of description. You want to ask about things like wall sockets, which becomes a real issue. A lot of those older apartments don't have many wall sockets. I've also lived in places that have a lot of sockets, but they're all on one wall, which can create a lot of problems. You want to check on things like also who's going to pay what bills, because I've run into issues with like water and even electricity being turned off because I was expected to pay for those things and nobody told me how to do it. These are all questions you really need to ask. If you're thinking about doing this, again, in any country, I don't care how good the situation is, stand up for your rights, ask a lot of questions, make sure you're not going to get screwed. Continuing.
Because they're the cheapest, dirtiest apartment in the city.
I came into a very molded and dirty house, actually filled with that teacher's things still, because they told me she was supposed to be gone. And when I came, she wasn't actually gone. So then I had to stay at the Hagwon owner's house, the supervisor's house, then the Hagwon owner's house. That was not fun. And that was with my baby.
Oh wow! So do you have a baby here in Korea? Are you married to a Korean?
I am actually a single mom, though my daughter is half Korean. So I'm on a whole adventure here.
And so, what are some of your biggest struggles as an English teacher in Korea?
Ooh, in my case, work-life balance. I have a little trouble going to the gym and getting some of that stuff done. I want to throw myself into this or that project, and I've had to slowly teach myself, no, get back to the real world, get back to taking care of yourself, etc. So for me, it's like balancing time.
I think some of my biggest struggles have been the work expectations. I used to work a remote tech-related 9-to-5 job, 40 hours a week, just working from home. So obviously my expectation of what I need to do for work was a lot lower, whereas now I'm spending on some days 11 hours at my academy. Granted, not that entire time is spent on work. A lot of it's, lunch times, breaks, stuff like that in between.
You have breaks. Okay. I realized nobody has watched my vlogs, but we didn't have breaks. When I was at the place I worked, once the classes started, they never stopped. So I'm already thinking you already have better working conditions than me, even if you're technically working longer hours. But the point he made, this was interesting because this is another one of my coworkers there. So he was working like a tech sector job. I had a guy who was working a tech sector job, and he was born in Korea, but he'd spent a lot of time in the States, and that's where he was living and working. I have no idea on earth why he chose to come back and work in a hagwon. Like, it blew my mind, because he clearly had a much, much better job than the one that we were doing at the time. And he didn't have a good explanation either, so I was just really confused, and I didn't want to push the question. But, yeah, a lot of people, I think, do... I was kind of one type where I started working overseas right out of college, which a lot of people do. It's a lot of times kind of a gap year thing. But the other major type of foreign teacher are the ones who've had like a standard job for a long time. They want to do something different, and then they kind of just get stuck there for one reason or another. I'm very quickly becoming a third type, which is a person who's made this into a career, which is not super common. Although, again, just given the amounts of time a lot of these people have been over here, it may be more common than I think. I don't know. Continuing.
In classes, however, it is just a lot more actual work required.
Some of the biggest struggles that I have faced in Korea specifically is not being taken seriously as a teacher. A lot of the students think English time is just break time or play time. A lot of the administrative staff of schools do not take complaints of foreign English teachers seriously. This is especially concerning if you work in a private school, because in Korea is a capitalist society. Profit rules everything. That's not necessarily a problem all of the time, but one complaint from a parent, and some English teachers are jobless and homeless in a country whose language they do not speak.
Yep. That is, well, as I've already said, this is becoming a problem because that's what this big protest is about, is that this is even an issue in public schools with public teachers. Like, the parents in this country really do treat all education as though it's just a service, like it's any other service they're paying for, which it is, especially when you're in the hagwons, when you're in these little private academies. But even in the public schools, they act like this. Now, I got into a lot of trouble with things like that, because you can. The very first place I worked, I'm not going to mention the company, I've probably mentioned them already, so whatever, I'm never working for these people again. One of the things that got me in trouble was I had a class once. It was meant to be, I think, either 50 minutes or 55 minutes, and I turned them loose a couple minutes early, and one of them complained. Now, the reason that this student did this was because this particular learning center, they charge by the lesson, and if you complain, you get that lesson for free. Which is absolutely why he did it, because there was only 3 students in that class, and they all came back the entire time I was working there. I didn't lose any of them. Nobody complained to me. I never had any feelings of resentment coming from them. It's just one of them saw an opportunity to save money on something very expensive, and I don't think he thought he was hurting me, but he screwed me over real, real good. Because when, again, It's a long story about what happened at that company. I technically was not fired. Technically, it was a mutual dissolution of the contract, but there's a story there. But the entire time I was working there, they kept bringing up this one complaint. Oh, this one student complained, you ended the class too early. And it can be that petty. It can be that small, and you can get in so much trouble over something so little. Now, in China these days, you won't have problems like that, because frankly, when I came back in 2018, the place I was working, I got called in once on a weekend. I don't think this is a story I've ever told. Because I was working with this weird private student. I was having to do like 3-hour classes with her, which was weird because I just arrived there. It turns out later no one else wanted to work with her because her boyfriend was a problem. Long story. But the point is, I got called in on a weekend. I was pissed off because I really thought they were about to fire me, which they didn't. And the reason is, in 2008, and I think this is the same problem they're having in Korea right now, in 2008, it was really easy to get into China. So there was this giant supply of teachers, and they could just kind of treat us as disposable parts. In 2018, it was a lot harder to get in. Fewer people wanted to do it, so we were just intrinsically seen as more valuable. They weren't going to fire me over something like that. Now, Korea right now is, again, because of the K-pop, because of BTS, because of Squid Game and Parasite and all these other things that Americans are obsessed with, they're kind of in the same situation. Like every week there's another, plane load of clueless foreigners coming in. So it's really, really easy to just discard a teacher, especially in these Hagwons where it is this really super, super low skilled work. I've been talking for a while because this is an issue that animates me. And I like this guy because I think I could get along really well with this guy. I have a feeling we've had the same experiences overseas. Continuing.
Because again, your boss is your landlord. Your boss controls your housing. Your boss controls your rental contract. So if you're out of a job, you're also out of a house. So
oh yeah, let me throw this in. When I lost that job, I did lose my house, and I was temporarily homeless in Chongqing. I was trying to get into another employer, and I was living with one of their employees, just sleeping on his couch, a stranger's couch, for like a month. It was a weird, weird experience. And I don't recommend you ever experience it, but, it's a good story, so there's that.
a lot of foreign English teachers feel like they're constrained, where if they do have a problem, if a student is misbehaving, a lot of the times the parents will say, what did you do to make my child act that way?
How do you think English teachers are perceived by Korean society in general these days?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. When I first came, like 10 years ago, I heard things like, some people had some negative stereotypes. For example, like they couldn't get jobs in their own country, so that's why they're out here.
They think we're all like losers back home that come here because we have no other options in like America or wherever you're from. So they think we're just like these, which a lot of people are, just weird people that come here to try and meet chicks. Other stereotypes, a lot of people think I'm in the military. I don't know if that's a stereotype, but I get all day. I also have like 2 big tattoos that you can't see right now, so that doesn't help my image.
I think some people treat it as a bit of a Mickey Mouse job. You're kind of performing and you're a glorified babysitter. Mm-hmm. But it's actually really, really hard.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of skills to be speaking all the time and be like constantly switched on for the kids. And then there's the classroom management, and I don't know many people who would be able to do it, honestly.
So just to go back to my old job there, the Hagwon where I was working. Now that I have a little bit of emotional distance and physical distance. The job is not technically hard. It is designed to be easy, I think, so that they can just swap people in and out. It is very low skill work. You have a lesson that's on a smart board, on a TV, and you just push buttons. And then you have a test they have to do, you hand out the test, you print the test, you hand it out, you grade it at the end of the day, and that's it. It is technically very easy work. The problem is, there is something very enervating about having to stand up in front of that group for 5-6 hours straight, because again, we didn't have breaks, and just always be on and always be aware of what's going on, because there's no real downtime. Even when you're not doing something, you have to monitor what everyone's doing, you're having to keep track of time, you're having to Make sure that the technology is not going to fail you, which happens a lot. You have to make sure that no one's beating anyone else up. You have to make sure that no one's cheating at times when that's relevant. And it saps the life out of you. Even though you're doing something that is technically very easy, it is just absolutely draining to manage it. And I think for a lot of those jobs, it is less a matter of your skills, because it is very low skill, and more a matter of your demeanor, your personality. Are you the right person to do this job? And most people just aren't. Continuing.
So, what's the most rewarding part for you about being an English teacher in Korea?
When the kids are having a hard day and you're able to make it better, because again, the expectations that are pushed on them in this country are pretty strong, pretty hard to achieve for any kid. So sometimes being able to teach them something and help their odds in this country while also helping them kind of chill out or calm down or feel a little bit better about themselves is nice. I've had a lot of kids that just break out and crying for no reason, and I know it's because of expectations that are pushed onto them. So being able to kind of give them a hug in that situation and have them happy at the end of the class is definitely one of the most rewarding things.
Oh man, I'm not gonna lie and make up some nonsense about how I love working with kids and it's like the most exhilarating thing, and I love making a difference in these kids' lives. Like, it's fun. They're cute, right? But I'm not doing this because I'm passionate about teaching. I do this because it's a cool experience and my job is really easy.
It's a very honest individual.
As far as the most rewarding thing, I think it would just be like the stress-free life I live. Like, my job is very, very easy, non-stressful. Living in Korea is pretty non-stressful. I don't have to worry about going to a bar and getting shot by some crazy dude, like I do back home. So that would probably be the most rewarding part.
If you actually want a low-stress job, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Find a way to get employed by a Chinese university. There's a reason why I'm going back to that kind of work after being out of it for a year. It's pretty chill. The pay is low, but it's also essentially full-time pay for part-time work. You do have to deal with students and their expectations a little more than you do in the private centers. Usually in the private centers, it's the local staff who are absorbing all of that. And good Lord, I need to find out if they've interviewed the Koreans who work in these centers, because it is a nightmare for them. It is so much worse than it is for us, because they have to do everything we do, and they also have to deal with the parents. Honestly, working when I hear people like this say it's very chill, I have a feeling it's because they've never experienced anything else, which is another thing, because so many of these people are first-time teachers. Even the ones who've been over there forever, it's probably the only place they've ever worked. And a lot of them just don't know that there are other places that are dramatically easier. But, if it works out for you, then I'm not going to... If you're enjoying yourself, I'm not going to try to convince you you're having a miserable time. The most I can do is give you my experience. You can believe it, you can not believe it, you can apply it to you a little bit or a lot. Again, I'm not your daddy. I can't make you do anything. I can't make you not do anything. All I can do is advise. Continuing.
Oh, the most rewarding part are my students, their growth and English language, and also just the love they give me. Like, actually, Friday, I just had a student. I was so sad because I forgot to bring it with me. She wrote me a little note because she said, "Oh, teacher, are you okay now?" And I said, "Oh, no, teacher, still a little hurting, stomach hurts." And then she wrote a little note and she said, "선생님, 아프지 마세요." And that says, "Teacher, please don't hurt. Like, please don't be in pain." And I was like, "Oh, you're so sweet." And then she said, turn. And I was like, "Okay." And the other side said, "선생님, 사랑해요." And it said, "Teacher, I love you." So, even if I'm so stressed out from that job, and some of the students, that just brings me so much joy and always reminds me, this is why I do it. These students, they love me and they're here to learn, and I can't let, those few students, ruin it for the rest.
Although I did once have a student who was going overseas make me, who I guess did like crochet. She crocheted me a little apple. I still have it. And the weird part is I hadn't known her for that long. I'd been sent to another city by my company, illegally, I should add. And I'd only worked with her for about a month. But I guess I made an impression. So.
Students.
Well, what are your plans for the future?
Future? I think I'll be here for a while. Yeah, my partner lives here. possibly teaching in like universities or maybe working as a professor.
So you see yourself staying here in Korea for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, it could be for good. Yeah, yeah.
I want to continue my career in communications and media. I'm actually interested in going into journalism as well.
Do you see yourself going back to your home country or, trying to find another job in Korea?
I'm going to be moving back to the UK. I think it's better for opportunities as a foreigner. It's my home. If you can speak Korean, you've got a better chance of getting a job here if you wanted to. But the chances are quite small.
Last weekend, I took South Korea's citizenship examination. I qualified. However, I missed it by 1 point. So I want to become a citizen of Korea because despite all of its flaws, I really do love living here. Korea is a gorgeous country with 5,000 years of art, culture, history, and it's the only country I can ever see myself living in. I don't see a future in the United States. I don't see a future for myself there.
So I'll say about this one brief thing, and this is a reason why you would not want to go to China. Is it's virtually impossible to stay there for good. Citizenship is something I never considered, dual citizenship, whatever. But it's even like there are people who are lived in China for 15, 20 years and just left because basically the whole time they're trying to shove you out the door. And eventually the energy it takes to stay there is just too much. So one of the bigger advantages to working in Korea, or it's probably true of Japan as well. I'm not as familiar with their laws, but other countries, you definitely, if you're trying to stay somewhere for good, China is not the choice. China is not the one. Continuing.
I don't see a future for myself as an English teacher.
I'm actually making a YouTube channel. It's still in the process, so but the name will be Hilla English, if I'm allowed to say that. Once I start making the YouTube channel, it will promote my private business more. Hopefully I start getting more students. I don't want to sound weird in saying so, but I feel special here. I feel like I'm really required to be here. The supply of English teachers is low, and the demand is always high compared to the supply. But if I go back to London, it's just a dime a dozen person,
So what's your advice to people watching abroad who are interested in becoming an English teacher here in Korea?
It'd be great. Become an English teacher. Throw yourself into it. Don't feel that you don't inhibit yourself if you're going, well, the apartment is kind of shabby, the pay is kind of shabby. No, throw yourself into it. After working out, after taking care of yourself, and screen out those people that aren't so happy, that find reasons to complain. There are certainly reasons to complain about it, but in general, consider yourself fortunate of the kind of stuff that you can do here.
Korea boo.
So about that point, one of the things, and again, I know I'm drifting into China a lot when I talk about this, but there are a lot of similarities. You do have people who've been in China for years and do nothing but complain about it. And after a while, you just want to ask these people, well, if you have a problem living here, then leave. Like a lot of Chinese people don't know why it is that foreigners come over there and just complain about China, because they can leave. And it's kind of the same situation. I didn't like Korea, so I left. Simple as that. Either you like it and you stay, or you don't like it and you leave. It's a very simple prospect. And don't be one of those assholes who moves to a country and shits all over the culture and then insists on staying there forever so you can keep complaining. All right, it's very simple. If you don't like where you are and you have the ability to leave, then leave. Very simple prospect. Continuing.
Koreans and K-pop lovers can just not mention it in the interview, and that'll increase their chances a lot. My recruiter literally told me, I don't care if you love K-pop or K-dramas, don't mention it in the interview. Because you just look like you are not appropriating, but you're appreciating the wrong parts of the culture. There's more to different Asian cultures and countries than just the media that's consumed internationally. I don't even care if you watch Squid Game like 100 times or something like that. That's not everything here. Yeah, that would be my advice. Don't be a Korea boo.
Please do your research. Join the Facebook groups about teaching. ask people to check your contracts. Go over, ask for more money, please. We're trying to raise that base pay amount to at least 2.5 million because, 2.1, 2.2, under 2.5 is really not cutting it anymore. And people are struggling. People are constantly asking for food donations and everything because they just can't survive like that. And please, if you come as a teacher, make sure teaching is something you're even slightly interested in, because otherwise, you're not going to
Not
give
gonna
your
make
best
it.
to those students, and they definitely deserve a teacher who's going to give their best.
All right. So that is teaching in Korea. So obviously not that many people have seen me lose my shit. In those vlogs I was doing during that brief awful time I was in Daejeon. But, I probably did make it seem excessively negative. I feel like everything I said was accurate. I do feel like a lot of people who kind of adapt to those things, if you can, that's fine. The problem of it is, a lot of people don't know that they can do better. I think one of the reasons I did not get along in Korea is I've worked better jobs overseas. I know what the situation's like in China. I know it's better. I know, especially these days, it comes down to this, and I think I've mentioned this at least one or two times. The working conditions and the pay and everything you're going to experience in another country is directly connected to how easy it is to get people to come and work there. So 2008 was terrible in China because it was really easy to get in and a lot of people were going there. 2018 was a great time in China because it was hard to get in and nobody wanted to go there. Korea probably used to be better when it was hard to get in. Now everybody wants to go there because all these little BTS and Blackpink fans, and it's really terrible. I have no idea if you hear the dogs going crazy in the background. I don't know why they're doing it. But it does just come down to that in terms of the overall situation. And I feel like a lot of these people, again, I am shocked at how long these people have been living there. A lot of them, I think, just aren't aware of the fact that you can do better. But again, some of these people are probably doing better than I ever did. If you were able to get work on a university, I think it's really hard. These days, it's mostly Hagwons, which is another reason I don't recommend people go over there, because it's terrible, terrible, terrible work, and I really don't recommend it. But if you can make it work, then you make it work. And I tend to agree with the person who said you kind of need to throw yourself into it. And I agree with the person who said you need to make your rights known. Both of those are important. If you go over there, you need to be a little bit serious about it, even if you're only planning to stay for a year. And you need to make sure that you're getting the best deal that you can. That means talking to people who've had experiences. That means comparing it to different jobs in the same country and even similar jobs in other countries to make sure that you're not being completely screwed over. And that is my spiel. And the dogs have shut up. So